Om Namo Narayanaye. Om Namo Narayanaye. Asmad Guru Namaha, Asmad Parama Guru Namaha, Asmad Sarva Guru Namaha. Today we're continuing on with chapter 2 of The Greatness of Saranagati. Chapter 2, the philosophical antecedents to the doctrine of Saranagati. The doctrine of Saranagati is not a first creation of Ramanuja or Pillai Lokacharya or Vedanta Deshika. It has to be traced to the Vedas and development to the Upanishads, Itihasas, Puranas, and devotional hymns of the Alvars. Hence, the doctrine of Saranagati is as old as Indian philosophy. But Ramanuja has popularized this doctrine to reach the common people, whereas Pillai Lokacharya and Vedanta Deshika systematized and enriched this doctrine as an independent sadhana for attaining moksha. This chapter aims at tracing the evolution of Saranagati from ancient Indian thought, from Vedas down to the utterances of the Alvars. Saranagati or property in the Vedas. Once again, we use Saranagati and property as synonymous, as basically surrender to God, surrender, the path of surrender. The idea of Saranagati has its origin in the Vedas, mostly in the Rig Veda, according to which the path of Saranagati, or self-surrender to the Lord, is the only means to moksha. It gives an immeasurable solace to the soul at every stage for one who practices it. Hence, Saranagati is the vital breath embedded in the Vedas and not drawn from outside. This is clear when it is said, Mura Amura Navayam Chikitvaha. It means that a man who is insignificant cannot realize the truth without the help of God. He is described as everything to man. On realizing his utter helplessness, akinchanya, a man prays to God to help him and lead him to the highest aspirations. This shows that even an insignificant man is capable of realizing the highest truth by surrendering himself at the feet of God. And God is described as everything to man at every stage of life. It clearly implies that God's grace and guidance are essential to make man's efforts successful. Therefore, man's emancipation is completely dependent upon God's grace. The same thought is echoed in the form of bhakti or Saranagati in the following Rig Vedic hymns, as observed by Professor N.S. Anantarangacharya in his work, The Philosophy of Sadhana in Vishishtadvaita. So here's some quotations. No diacritics have been given, so we'll just attempt to say them. Vyamindra, Tvaya Vasaka Tvam Arabhyam He. Rig Veda 5:10. So I guess that's 5th mandala, 10th sutta, 133:6. Twamasmakam twasmasi. Rig Veda 5:8, 92-93. Agnenaya supataraya yasman. This sounds very much like the last verse of Sri Upanishad. Rig Veda 5:1, 189:1. Shriye te pada duva amimikshuhu. Rig Veda 5:6, 29:3. Ayami te nama uktim dushasva. Rig Veda 5:3, 14:2. So we could look up all these quotes and get the proper transliteration with diacritics. That would be nice, and see the meaning. Again, it describes God as Neta Agnir Neta. Then there's a footnote. There's some footnotes here, so we'll see what the footnotes say probably at the end of the chapter. A leader who leads us to peace and happiness from the trials and tribulations of life and depicts God as Jananam Jamihi Mitraha Preyaha, which means a close friend in relation to all. Adabdho Gopa Amutasya Rakshita. It means God is called the savior of the world, whom none could obstruct. Again, it is said, Nahi Twad Anyaha Puruhuta Taschara Maghavanasti Mardita. It means God saves people who take refuge in him from the ocean of samsara, or the wheel of birth and death, by his grace. Cycle of birth and death. Again, it is shown, Dhanvan Niva Prapasi, which means God is like a spring of water in the midst of a sandy desert. And Daive Navam Svaritra Managasam Ashravantim Aruhema Swastaye. It means God is like a non-leaking boat, that can safely take us to the shore in the disturbed waters of life. Again, it is referred, Atva Rambham na Jivrayo Rarambha Savas Aspate. It points out that God is compared to a staff on whom the weak and ignorant man can lean and walk happily. These references make it clear that a man who is subservient to God and with whose grace he attains bliss, happiness, and peace. So, to attain God's grace, one has to surrender absolutely to the lotus feet of the Lord. The Samhita portions of the Vedas, so the Vedas are called Shruti, and they have 4 sections, Samhita, Brahmana, Aranyaka, and Upanishad. So the Samhita sections, the Rig Veda, Yajurveda, and Samaveda, and Atharva Veda Samhitas, right, also have the references to the principle of Saranagati, or surrender. Ahir Budnya Samhita observes that Saranagati is a kind of prayer making one to realize with strong conviction that the egoistic feeling and the possessive feeling arising out of one's possession is utterly false. The truth is that man is not independent and has nothing which he calls his own. Nothing he truly calls his own. The Sattva Samhita states, I don't know why he's talking here, he started to talk about this, these Samhitas are Samhitas of the Pancharatra Agama. So we have, he's starting this paragraph talking about Samhita portions of the Vedas, but these are not Vedic Samhitas. Ahirbuddha Samhita and Sattva Samhita are Pancharatric Samhitas. They're not considered to be Shruti. The Sattva Samhita states, my body, my wealth, and my relations do not belong to me. They all belong to God. The man should also feel that the process of offering himself to God and by drawing God towards him is the only way through which he can understand the highest truth. Thus, Samhitas also have the references about Sharanagati directly and indirectly. Okay, so I don't know why they're talking about the Sattva Samhita here. He's confusing the Sattva Samhita and the Ahirbuddha Samhita, which are Pancharatric Samhitas, with the Samhita section of the Vedas. They're not Samhita section. They're not part of the Samhita section of the Vedas. Though the words like property and Sharanagati or Nyasa Vidya, which is one of there are 32 methods mentioned in the Upanishads of attaining moksha, and one of them is called Nyasa Vidya. These 32 ways or methods of sadhanas are called vidyas or knowledges. So Nyasa Vidya is the last one, which is actually synonymous with Sharanagati and property, not directly found in the Samhita portions of the Vedas, but the idea of Sharanagati can be, or surrender, can be gleaned. But the fact is that Sharanagati to the highest authority, that is God, surrender to the highest authority, that is God, is the only means to attain spiritual perfection, is clearly implied. So he's saying this is implied in the Samhita section of the Vedas. Thus, the idea of Sharanagati has its origin in the Vedas as a means for attainment of spiritual perfection. Okay, so now we're going to talk about not the Samhita section, but the Upanishads, right? So all of that about the Ahirbuddha Samhita and the Sattva Samhita, these are not Vedic Samhitas, so they don't really, their mention doesn't really belong in the previous section. We can talk about them later when we talk about the Pancharatra. Sharanagati, or surrender in the Upanishads. Now we're going to talk about the Nyasa Vidya, the Upanishadic method or knowledge of surrender. The Upanishads, which are significant sources of Vedanta, in fact, the Vedanta, or the end of the Vedas, or the end of the Shruti, as the last section, is called the Upanishads, have shown the concept of Sharanagati freely. The deep-rooted teachings of Upanishads have an influence on Sri Vaishnavism, while constructing the doctrine of Sharanagati, or surrender. The Isavasya Upanishad directly declares the necessity for Sharanagati, or surrender for self-realization. It says, Agnena Supataraya Yasman Vishvani Deva Vayonani Vidvan Yudyo Jasma Juhranam Neno Uishtam Te Nama Uktim Videma. This is the last verse. At least we find the Isa Upanishad, the Isavasya Upanishad, as part of is the 40th verse. It's the 40th chapter of the Madhyantika Vajrasanaya Samhita. It's actually part of the Samhita, so it is called the Samhita Upanishad for that reason. And it occurs both in the Madhyandina branch of the Shukla Yajurveda and also the Kanva branch of the Shukla Yajurveda, but with slightly different order of verses, a little bit of a difference. In order that God is both Prapya, or attainer, and Prabhaka, or leader, it ordains that God is both Prapya, attainer, and Prabhaka, or leader. It advises an aspirant to surrender himself to the Lord with an implicit faith in him alone. The word Nama Ukti refers to the means, that is, Sharanagati, or surrender. The Svetashvatara Upanishad clearly expounds the necessity of property, or Sharanagati, for the redemption of the jiva meaning the individual soul, the Atman. In this Upanishad, there is an explicitly rooted meaning for Sharanagati, or meaning or meanings. It is stated that to him who of old creates Brahma, and who greatly delivers to him the Vedas, to that personality of Godhead, who is enlightened by his own intellect, do I, being desirous of moksha, resort to as a shelter, or take shelter of God. It shows the necessity of Sharanagati for the he says there, redemption, it should be redemption, this spelling mistake here, of the Jivatman. Again, the mantras of the Isavasya Upanishad, from 15th mantra to the 18th mantra, deserve special attention. Truth's face is covered with a golden lid. Remove that, O Pushan. He's referring to the verse, Hiranmayena Patrena Satyasyapi Gamnikam. Okay? Truth's face is covered. Truth meaning the Supreme Lord. His face is covered, Hiranmayena, the golden one, O Pushan, that I, truth's devotee, may know it. It is clear that Sharanagati is involved here because the concluding portion of the Upasana insists on a total revelation and a prayer for it. Remove that, O Pushan. So there's a prayer involved, and it indicates a form of surrender in order to achieve the knowledge of God. To remove that, O Pushan, who has certainly has certainly a temperament of all piety and even desperate demand, which exactly conforms to the definition of Sharanagati. In Chandogya Upanishad, it prescribes Sharanagati or surrender to all to attain immortality. This Upanishad says that only he who surrenders himself to God becomes Brahma Samasta. It states, Indram Sharanam Prapano Bhuvam, Prajapatim Sharanam Prapano Bhuvam, Mrityum Sharanam Prapano Bhuvam. Pushan is a name. There are many names that are given to the Supreme in the Vedas and the Upanishads. All these names mean Supreme, Sriman Narayana. Which means I surrender to Ishvara, I surrender to Prajapati, I surrender to the god of death, Mrityum, right? So in this case, we know that by all these names in the Vedas, the Supreme Lord Krishna is known, right? He says this in the Bhagavad-Gita, by all the Vedas are to be known. So that's the oldest of the Upanishads, right? Chandogya is a very old Upanishad. Enjoy Sharanagati to one and all to be immortalized. The same Upanishad repeats that Brahma samsto amritattvameti. It means that one who would become Brahma samasta when one surrenders himself to Paramatma. In the second and fourth slokas or verses of Mundaka Upanishad, the Pranava Mantra Omkara is described, which is nothing but a description of Sharanagati. The text says, Pranavo Danuhu Sharo Hyatma Brahma Talakshyamuchyate Pramatena Tene Vedhayam Saravatanmayo Bhavet. Here the Pranava, or the syllable Om, right, is compared to a bow. The soul is compared to an arrow, and Brahman, or the supreme Godhead, is the target. Single-minded concentration and devotion would enable one to achieve it. Again, Sharanagati is said to be compared to a Brahmastra. A Brahmastra is a type of weapon or mantric weapon, right? Which by itself is capable of giving the desired results immediately. The Mahanarayana Upanishad explains and glorifies Sharanagati as follows. Tasmad samesham tapasam atirikta mahu vasuranyo vibhurasi brahmane tva mahasa omityatmanam yunjeta. The Mamukshapadi, Mamukshapadi is a book by Piranha, one of his Rahasya Granthas, which speaks about the secret esoteric meanings of the Sri Vaishnava, the mantras used by Sri Vaishnavas, Om Namo Narayanaya, the Astakshara mantra, Dvaya mantra, and Charma Sloka of Lord Krishna, Bhagavad-Gita 1866, elaborates as Om as A, U, and M. And in fact, this is in the Mahanarayana Upanishad that we have Akara, Ukara, Makara, Iti is explained, that A-U-M is explained as Omkara. The Pranava, which is a transcendental syllable, and what it means is described in the Upanishads and also in Mamukshapadi. So, is elaborated as A-U-M, and A indicates the Paramatman, right, or the Supreme Lord, who is Lord Narayana, and who is the source of all living things, of all things, the source of all things, not only living things, but non-living things. U represents Lakshmi, or his divine consort Sri Devi, and the letter M indicates the Jiva, who is supported and benefited by Sharanagati, or surrender, who attains liberation, right? In Katha Upanishad, we find reference to the doctrine of Sharanagati. This Upanishad declares this knowledge cannot be obtained through reasoning, only when it is taught by another. Oh, my dearest, it is capable of being well known. The same knowledge you have attained to, you are firm resolution, O Nachiketas, I pray that inquiries of us may be like you. So, for those of you who don't know, Katha Upanishad is told in a story of a boy called Nachiketas who goes to hell and who asks different questions of Yamaraj. And so Yamaraj is here saying that Nachiketas, you're asking some good questions, and therefore you have firm resolution or determination to get the answers about what is supreme, and that's very good. The other passage depicts the importance of Acharya Abhimana as one of the important. Acharya Abhimana means resorting to and surrendering unto the feet of an acharya or of a teacher or guru, right, as a means towards liberation. Acharya Abhimana as one of the important and general conditions for Sharanagati. In the conclusion, it is shown that anyone whose resolution is firm must become a prapana, or a refugee, or a person who resorts to the feet of the Lord, is irresistible. The human will is not capable for such determination without the grace of God and without being focused in surrender to its destined end. The following expression of such focus is clear in Sharanagati. It is stated, I know that wealth is transitory. Verily, that eternity is not attained through things that are transitory. The fire altar Nachiketas has constructed by me with with transitory things. I have therefore attained the eternal. Right. So the above passage traces a description about the fruits of Sharanagati, both positive and negative realization of futility of the fulfillment of worldly desires by means of action and consequent attainment of liberation. Mahanarayana Upanishad contains references to the requirements and results of a life of a prapana who followed Sharanagati as a means to moksha. This Upanishad observes, as a result of the consummation of the fruits of highly meritorious deeds, this has brought about association with the righteous. Therefrom is generated the power of discrimination. Thence is generated the proclivity of righteous conduct. Through righteous conduct, one is brought about the destruction of all sins. Thence, the inner and outer senses attain transparent purity. So there's a systematic advancement through different stages here. This Upanishad again proceeds and states, thereafter is generated faith in and devotion to Lord Vishnu. Then springs up detachment. From detachment springs discrimination and knowledge of the world. Through constant practice, that knowledge develops into ripened wisdom. In the same Narayana Upanishad, we have another elaborate occurrence about the Pranava Mantra, which is fundamental source of Sharanagati. The honest practice of this mantra, namely Omkara or Om itself, is considered to qualify a soul to do Sharanagati, as the soul, represented by the letter M, is a servant to God, represented by the letter A in the Pranava. The text declares, the practitioner of this mantra will attain the abode of Vishnu Vaikuntha. So this is actually quoting again from where Mumukshapati talks about the Omkara. It quotes some passages from the Atharva Veda Narayana Shira Upanishad, which is not to be misconfused or confused with the Mahanarayana Upanishad, which we were discussing before. So we discuss first of all this Narayana Upanishad, then Mahanarayana Upanishad, now again Narayana Upanishad. So in this Narayana Upanishad, it says, Om Namo Narayana Iti Mantrapasakaha Vaikuntha Bhuvana Lokam Gamishyati, that the practitioner of this mantra, or the upasaka, the worshipper of this mantra, will attain the abode of Vishnu, Vaikuntha Bhuvana Lokam Gamishyati, which means in the future he will attain that place, or the supreme heaven of Lord Vishnu, Sriman Narayana. This abode of Vishnu is the white lotus of the heart. Well, it's also considered to be a place, but it can be also understood to be the white lotus of the heart, the palpable sentience, which shines as a flash of lightning alone. So in other words, moksha, which involves complete knowledge or ultimate knowledge or knowledge of the truth. The Parameshvara abiding in it is the Brahmanya, the son of Devaki. The Vank, son of Devaki, of course, it refers to Lord Krishna, who took birth in Mathura from Vasudeva and Devaki. The vanquisher of the demon Madhu, right? Also referring to Lord Krishna, Lord Vishnu. Vishnu alone is Brahmanya. The sentence known as Narayana, that is established in all beings, is, after all, one alone. What is looked upon as the prime cause is in reality the Parabrahman, who has no cause of its own. This is the sum and substance of the crest of the Atharva Veda. So this is a quote from Atharva Vedya, Narayana Shira Upanishad, or it can be just called Narayana Upanishad. Thus, the doctrine of Sharanagati has its origin in the Upanishads. So we talked about the Veda Samhitas, now we talk about the Upanishads. The next section is going to tell us about Sharanagati, or surrender, in the Bhagavad Purana. Bhagavad Purana is one of the Sattvic Puranas. There are 18 Mahapuranas, out of which 6 are considered most important for persons in the mode of goodness, 6 for people in the mode of passion, and 6 for people in the mode of ignorance. But however, the Bhagavad Purana, the Vishnu Purana, these are very, very important Puranas out of the Sattvic 6. So the credit goes to Vyasa for the authorship of the 18 Puranas, including the Bhagavad Purana. These Puranas have references to Sharanagati, or surrender to the Lord. They contain, he says, mythological episodes presented in the form of poetry. So, of course, the Puranas are usually in meter form, metrical form. So they're in, just like Bhagavad-Gita or the Ramayana, they're in these epics and scriptures are in particular meters. They contain mythological episodes presented in the form of poetry. They teach us cosmogony. He refers to them as mythological episodes. Okay, so whether you believe that they are factual histories, or whether you believe that they are stories which are simply meant to explain a particular philosophical point, is not really the point here. The point here is to understand whether the process of Sharanagati or surrender is explained in these scriptures. They teach us cosmogony, social order, and also Sharanagati. So there's actually two different definitions of the Puranas of what is a Purana, and it has either 5 or 10 different subject matters in it. A Purana is defined as having 5 or 10 different subject matters in it. So we won't go into that here exactly. But anyway, he's pointing out that there are different subject matters in the Puranas. One of them is Sharanagati, or surrender to the Lord. Though they combine Sharanagati with popular beliefs, they do not aim at any systematic development of thought. I'm narrating below the importance of Sharanagati preached by Dhritarashtra, Prahlada, Gajendra, and Ambarisha, as stated in the Bhagavad Purana. So, he's got here, Dhritarashtra's Saranagati. The history of Dhritarashtra can be shown to show a clear illustration of Sharanagati. I think I mean Dhritarashtra here. Dhritarashtra is said to have offered Sharanagati first to Vidura and then to the Supreme Lord on the advice of the latter. This story is well written and summarized in his work by V.K. Ramanujacharya. He says, seeing that his brother Dhritarashtra's life was coming to a close, he, Vidura, addressed him as follows: "Get out quickly. Bhagavan Kala, or the Supreme Person in the form of time, cannot be evaded by any means at any time. How wonderful is the desire of people to live. You set fire to the residence of the Pandavas." So this is a reference to a story in the Mahabharata where the Pandavas, or the 5 brothers, who were enemies of the Kauravas and Dhritarashtra, right? Although they were cousins, right? So were in exile, and they were in a palace made of shellac or lac, and that residence was set on fire to try to kill them. You administered poison to them, right? You tried to poison them. Their wife was insulted in your presence, and you deprived them of their kingdom and wealth. What do you gain by the life which you have suffered which they have suffered you to live. He is the wise man who, having attained a body, the means for teaching the true goal, abandons all desires and attachments and throws up his body without his relations knowing where he went and what became of him. So Vidura is giving advice to Dhritarashtra at the end of his life. He is the best of men who is disgusted with the world, either of his own motion or under instruction from another, who fixes his mind on Bhagavan Supreme and departs from home. Go to the north without your relations knowing it. This speech of Vidura had the desired effect, and Dhritarashtra cut his strong attachments and proceeded with his brother in the direction pointed out by him, followed by his faithful wife Gandhari. So here it may be noted that the act of repentance and Sharanagati came to Dhritarashtra only at the end of his life. Interesting. So now that's one story in the Bhagavad Purana. Another story is the story of Prahlad's Sharanagati, or Prahlad's surrender. In the case of Prahlada was the son of Hiranyakashipu, who was a demon, asura, but he was a great devotee of the Lord. Sharanagati is exhibited from his childhood. However, it is expressly opposite to Dhritarashtra's Sharanagati that dawns on him at the end of his life. Prahlad surmounts all the impediments set on him by his mere Sharanagati and never revolts even once. He never resists the arrogant attempts of his father, which not only become futile, but pave the way for more rigorous Sharanagati, more rigorous surrender. Ultimately, Prahlad brings moksha to his arrogant father, Hiranyakashipu, by effecting the appearance of Lord Narasimha, one of the incarnations, one of the 10 avatars of the Lord Sriman Narayana. In the words of V.K. Ramanujachari, Prahlad was without desire of any kind. He saw that the fruits sought by men in this world and in the next are not worth striving for. When any unwelcome things came, he felt no pain. His mind, the senses, and prana, the life airs, were ever under control. His life airs were ever under control. His conduct was exemplary. Though he was an asura by birth, right? He was born in a demoniac family. He was without the nature found in other asuras, so he was of a divine nature. Even as a boy, he found no pleasure in his toys. Though he had a high birth, a fine person, wealth of every kind and great learning, he was without conceit. He regarded all things as himself and wished their welfare. Well, he wished the welfare of all living beings. So he bowed before the feet of worthy people like a servant. He loved helpless men like their parents. He was attached to men of equal age as if they were Bhagavan himself. He was considerate to Brahmanas, and he ever kept his word. He found pleasure in Bhagavan, the Supreme Lord, by nature. His mind being ever fixed on him, he appeared to the world like a fool, but he did not know what was going on around him. Whatever he did, he ever thought of Bhagavan, the Supreme Lord. Wherever he sat, went about, took his food or quenched his thirst, lay down or spoke. He was not aware of these actions, thinking only of the Supreme Lord. He would sometimes weep, sometimes he would laugh, he would sing aloud, he would dance without being ashamed. He would imitate the Supreme Lord's deeds sometimes. He would remain silent with his hair standing on end and with his eyes closed and tears falling down therefrom. Poets do not sing the praises of anyone as they sing the praises of Prahlad even now. Even enemies sing his praises, and he is held up as an example to all men. This shows Prahlad became a prapana, or refugee, seeking surrender as a sadhana for attaining moksha. Okay, so that's a little bit about the story of Prahlad. Gajendra, the king of the elephants, and his Sharanagati, or his surrender. The Sharanagati or surrender, these are all episodes related in the Bhagavad Purana. The Sharanagati or surrender sadhana is instrumental in attaining God realization, but it requires a total absence of feeling of ego or I-ness. This fact can be illustrated by the story of Gajendra's moksha in the Potana Bhagavatam. Okay, so there are different forms of the Bhagavatam. Of course, we're used to the Bhagavad Purana in Sanskrit by Vedavyasa, authored by Vedavyasa. But we have also, for instance, in Kerala, they have Narayaniyam, which is basically the story of the Bhagavatam written in Sanskrit by someone in Kerala. Here he's referring to a regional version of the Bhagavatam called the Potana Bhagavatam in Telugu language. Just like we have the Ramayana written in Tamil, or called Kamba Ramayana. And we have the story of Lord Rama written in Advari, or a type of Hindi, written by Tulsidas, called Ramcharit Manas. So Gajendra, a lot of these Sanskrit literature, these Sanskrit scriptures have been translated into vernacular languages in different parts of Asia, India. Gajendra, the king elephant, was swimming in a lake. It was caught by a giant crocodile suddenly. However hard he tried, Gajendra was unable to free himself from the clutches of the crocodile. Gajendra, totally tired and helpless, ultimately surrendered himself to Lord Vishnu, pleading for protection. Day and night, Gajendra prayed for divine intervention. The crocodile's hold was torturing and intolerable. Ultimately, Gajendra made Sharanagati with his body and soul and offered the following prayer. So he gives a prayer here. Presumably this is from the Telugu Potana Bhagavatam. It's in Telugu script. I'm not going to try to read the Telugu transliteration, which means, quote, strength spent out and courage collapse, O Varda. Varda is the name of the Lord who gives boons, who gives what we pray for. And my life lingers in my throat. All senses lost and physique fatigued beyond hope. No other protector than you, O Lord. O Savior, come and free me, rescuer of the distress from this enemy's hold and fortune and anguish. So I think that's anguish because it seems like there should be a G instead of a J there. That's a spelling mistake. The way in which the Lord went to save Gajendra was beautifully depicted in the Potana Bhagavatam in the following manner. Again, I'm not going to attempt to read the transliteration of the Telugu. At that time, Lord Vishnu was with Sri Lakshmi in Vaikuntha. When Gajendra's prayer from earth fell on the ears of Vishnu, he instantly stood up with a chakra, with his discus weapon, and fled to rescue Gajendra without even informing Lakshmi where he was going, and not even adjusting back mantle frills of Lakshmi's sari that came upon his shoulders. Such was Vishnu's hurry and anxiety to rescue his devotee Gajendra in distress. So he immediately went to rescue his devotee Gajendra, who had surrendered to him and who had taken to the path of surrender or Sharanagati. This story of Gajendra is a clear representation of Potana's notion of Sharanagati. He wrote Bhagavatam in Telugu skillfully, poetically, and depicts his beliefs in Sharanagati. Without Sharanagati, and of course, it's there also in the Sanskrit Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Purana by Vedavyasa also, that story. Without Sharanagati or surrender, it would be humanly impossible to make such a superb and magical impact in the episode of Gajendra. After killing the Makari or the Makara or Makari, the crocodile, Lord Vishnu comes to the elephant who had swooned in the lake, pats him affectionately, accepts his lotus flowers and blesses him, such as Gajendra's Sharanagati to Lord Vishnu. Okay, and so both Gajendra and the crocodile were both cursed Gandharvas who had taken those forms from a curse from a previous life, like that. They were known as the Gandharvas Ha and Hu. Okay, so then Ambarish, King Ambarish, or Ambarish Maharaja's Sharanagati or surrender, that's also mentioned in the Bhagavatam. Another example of tracing the doctrine of Sharanagati is the story of Ambarisha. This story of Ambarish's Sharanagati can be shown. The story narrates that sage Durvasa was invited by King Ambarish to have lunch one day. Durvasa agrees and goes to the river Kalindi, right, which means the Yamuna, for a holy bath, as it was Dwadasi day. So usually there's fasting which goes on the day before this, and the breaking of the fast is done on the morning of this day of Dwadasi. So he took bath in the river and came late. The king had waited for a long time, worried as it was nearing the time to take Paranam. Paranam means the breaking of the fast from the previous day. So the previous day of Ekadasi, he'd done the fast, and he was going to break the fast. So he was waiting, but the etiquette is that you should wait for the guest to come. If you have a guest, you have to wait for the guest. But at the same time, you have to break the fast at a certain time. So the king was getting anxious because of that. So on Dwadasi day, the following procedure, the king just took holy water of the deity. So he took the tirtha or charamrita, the holy water of the deity, in order to break the fast from the previous day. But it was considered breaking the fast, but not breaking the fast, so that he wouldn't offend Durvasa. But Durvasa, the sage, returns and gets annoyed at this insult heaped upon him. So he feels insulted that the king has broken the fast, even though he only just sipped some water. The angry sage creates Kritya, the killer devil, and orders it to devour the king. The king finds himself in this helpless situation, that he has somehow offended the sage, and the sage created a demon to kill him. So, who is also a devotee of Lord Vishnu, invoked him and with utmost surrender to save him from the demon Kritya. Lord Vishnu, in reply to the prayer, sent his chakra or discus weapon to rescue Ambarisha. The chakra kills this demon Kritya, which is created by the sage Durvasa, and chases the sage Durvasa also. Durvasa seeks the help of Brahma by going to Satyaloka, the abode of Lord Brahma. Brahma pleads his inability and advises the sage to seek Vishnu's help, saying that he, Vishnu alone, can withdraw his weapon or chakra, his discus, and no one else. Durvasa then goes to Vaikuntha, and he pleads with Lord Vishnu himself, who recalled his chakra and taught him how a sage should behave. Actually, if we read in the Bhagavatam, the Lord Vishnu himself says that Durvasa should beg forgiveness from the person that he has offended, that is his devotee Ambarisha. Right, in this context, Lord Vishnu tells us, and here he is again quoting from this Telugu version of the Bhagavatam, the Potana Bhagavatam. We can find the same thing though if we look at the story in the Sanskrit Bhagavatam, which means my well wishers are devotees, and unto them I am final salvation. Wherever my devotees go, there, like a calf behind its mother, I go. So this shows how the Lord is very much pleased by the surrender and by his devotees, and always wants to be there in the company of his devotees. In the other stanza, the power of Saranagati is illustrated by showing that God himself is a follower of his devotees. So when the devotee surrenders to God, God, who is surrendered to, then feels obliged to help the devotees. So now we have finished talking about different aspects of surrender there in the Bhagavad Purana, and we're going to talk about Saranagati in the Ramayana. Ramayana is called the golden bedrock of Saranagati Vidya, right, of the knowledge of Saranagati, or the process of Saranagati. It is an explanation and narration of one of the 32 Brahma Vidyas, named Vinyasa Vidya or Saranagati. It can be perceived from two perspectives, namely Siddhopaya, or the God as the ultimate goal of realization, and Sadhyupaya, or Saranagati, which is the means of taking refuge in the Lord. In Ramayana, in the Ramayana, the Siddhopaya aspect of Lord Rama is asserted to prove that he is the supreme Brahman, or supreme Lord. Rama, however, conceals his identity as Lord Narayana and convinces others he is like an ordinary human being, though his real nature is asserted by the gods, including Brahma, after the death of Ravana. Brahma declares. So here's some some of the Sanskrit from the Ramayana, which means you are the Lord Narayana with Shri, the disc-weaponed and all-pervading. You made the Varaha Avatara, the incarnation of the great boar, and conqueror of all enemies in the past and in the future. You are the indestructible and truthful Brahman, O Raghava, O Rama. You are in the middle and the end of the worlds. You are the supreme supporter of the worlds. You are the four-armed Vishvaksena. You are the Lord of the senses. You are the being and supreme being. The divine sages declare that you are the refugee and the refuge. Sita is goddess Lakshmi, and you are Lord Vishnu. This is a quote from Ramayana. Now, Tara, the wife of Bali, one of the monkey associates of Lord Rama, also says the following: you are the abode for noble, like a tree for the birds. You are the only protection for the people in distress. You are the refuge of all the troubled people. You are the only repository of fame. In other words, just like a tree is a shelter for the birds, you are a shelter for all living beings. Now, Vibhishana, who was the brother of Ravana, also a demon, who surrendered also to Lord Rama, right, and performed Sharanagati, he says, Sharanya, Raghava, O Rama, is the refuge to those living souls and creatures in seven worlds like Bhur, Bhuva, Suvaha, Maha, Jana, Tapa, and Satyam. The seven worlds like Atala, so these were the seven worlds, higher planetary systems, and then lower planetary systems. Atala, Vitala, Sutala, Tala, Tala, Taratala, Rasatala, Mahatala, and Patala, existing down below the earth. Even though Rama had killed Ravana, his wife Mandodari says the following: you are the great sage manifested. You are the supreme being, the very ancient one. You are the greatest of the great. So in all cases, all of these people, even though some of them were inimical towards Rama, recognized him as the supreme Lord. All the above narrations no doubt show that the Ramayana is the Upa Brahmana, right? So it is similar. It's similar to the Shruti or of the Vedas, and Rama is the Siddhyopaya, the self-accomplished divinity. The Sharanagati Vidya is well narrated and expounded in all the khandas, all the different sections of the Ramayana. In the Bala Khanda, which deals with the childhood pastimes of Lord Rama, the Sharanagati, or the surrender of the gods to Lord Vishnu in the ocean at the ocean of milk, is observed. The Ayodhya Khanda, talking about Lord Rama in Ayodhya, Bharata makes surrender or Sharanagati in Chitrakuta. When the Lord went into exile, Lord Rama went into exile. In Aranyakanda, the section about where Lord Rama is in the forest, the sages surrender to Rama when the demons harass. In Kishkinda Kanda, Sugriva seeks refuge in Lord Rama, who promises to redeem Sugriva's wife from Vali. So Vali was the brother of Sugriva, but he had stolen Sugriva's wife and also his lost kingdom. So in the Sundara Kanda, it is shown that Trijata, instigating the Rakshasa ladies to surrender to Sita. In the Yudhakanda, it is quite known that Vibhishana, belonging to the opposite camp and brother of Ravana, surrenders before Rama with four of his followers. It is seen that Lord Rama, as Siddhopaya, granted the request of all those who surrendered and fulfilled their desires. It is depicted in Ramayana that Kakasura, Indra's son in the form of a crow, right, committed a blunder by physically attacking and injuring Sita. This enraged Rama, who attacked the Kakasura with a simple blade of grass, and ultimately the crow fell at Rama's feet helplessly. The crow's father, Indra, abandoned his son as he could not interfere in the matter against the arrow of Rama. In the same way, Kakasura wandered all the worlds and at last surrendered before Rama, who is the protector. Sita, who was by Rama's side, just turned the crow's head down to Rama's feet as an act of surrender to Rama by the crow. This act of Sita is mentioned in Padma Purana only. That's interesting. This was narrated as a symbol by Sita to Hanuman when he met her in the Ashokavana. So, in the Ramayana, Sita, the consort or wife of Lord Rama, is kidnapped or taken away by Ravana and kept in a grove of Ashok trees in Sri Lanka. And Hanuman is sent there as a messenger from Lord Rama to see her. Valmiki, who the author of Ramayana, lucidly narrates this in the following verses, which means that Kakasura, right, that crow who was the son of Indra, having been disowned by his father, the gods and sages, wandered all the three worlds and took refuge in Rama. Kakasura deserves death, but was protected because he took refuge in Rama and fell on the ground before him. But Lord Rama made blind one of the eyes of Kakasura, right, as a measure to thwart its further wickedness and violence. From the above instances, it is observed that Sharanagati is extremely powerful, or surrender is extremely powerful, which prevails the whole of the Ramayana from the beginning to the end. So now let's further go into some other aspects of Sharanagati or surrender that are also in the Ramayana. The 5 angas of property or Sharanagati, the five Sharanagati can be defined, and it can be talked about as having 5 limbs or 5 different sections. They are Anukulya Sankalpa, particles of Arjuna, Mahavishvasha, Goptra Varnam, Karpanya, right? Should be practiced along with the Angi, namely, so the Angas or the limbs and the main part of the body, right? Or the Angi, which is Atmanikshepa. Atmanikshepa means Sharanagati. That is another way of saying Sharanagati property, Nyasa Vidya, or Atmanikshepa, means surrender of the soul, right? These 5 angas of Sharanagati are abundantly found in the Ramayana. Hence, the Ramayana is admitted as a textbook of practical religion and regarded as the Sharanagati Veda, right? It's a very important book on Sharanagati, in which the Vibhishana Sharanagati to Rama is regarded as the Upanishad part, filled in itself the essence of Ramayana. Right. So if we think of the whole Ramayana as like the Vedas, the Upanishad section of it is the part where Vibhishana surrenders to Lord Rama. So Vibhishana's surrender is considered to be the paradigmatic or the quintessential form of surrender to the Lord. So if anybody's interested in that and Vibhishana's surrender to Sharanagati, you can look on the same channel, this YouTube channel, and you can see the book called Abhaya Pradana Saram. It's a book by Vedanta Deshika described, where he describes in detail this surrender of Vibhishana to Lord Rama in the Ramayana. And also about Lord Rama's promise of protection through the Ramacharma Sloka, Sakrideva Prapannaya Tavasmiti Charyachate Abhayam Sarvabhute Vyodam Yetad Vitam Mama. So the surrender of Vibhishana illustrates this fact. Vibhishana Sharanagati is a favorite topic for scholars, especially to the Sri Vaishnava philosophy. He is a supreme example for Sharanagati or surrender, who sought refuge in Rama, rebelling against the authority of his brother Ravana, who symbolizes evil for him. Vibhishana's Sharanagati or surrender contains all the angas and the angi. So what were the angas again? What were the 5 angas? They were Anukulya Sankalpa, Padikuli Savarjuna, Mahavishvasha, Goptra Varnam, Karpanyam, and the angi, or the main thing which they are the 5 parts of, is Atmanikshepa or surrender. So the surrender of Vibhishana illustrates this fact that Vibhishana's surrender is a favorite topic of scholars, especially to the Sri Vaishnava philosophy. He is the supreme example of Sharanagati or surrender, who sought refuge in Rama, rebelling against the authority of his brother, who symbolized evil for him. Vibhishana's Sharanagati contains all the angas and the angi of Sharanagati, so all 6 things. In the words of Surpanaka, who was the demoniac sister of Ravana, who approached Ram and Lakshmana and menaced Sita in the forest. In the words of Supranaka, she says these words. It means Vibhishana is Dharmatma, and he is one freed from wicked deeds of Rakshasas. Such a Dharmatma, so a holy soul, right? Requested his brother Ravana to give back Sita and be free from all anxiety, because Ravana was in anxiety because he had kidnapped Sita. He knew that Rama would come to try and kill him and take her back. So Vibhishana said to his brother that you should simply give her back and then you will be free from anxiety. He expressed this in quite a number of times. The original sloka states, this is an illustration of the first anga, anukulyasa sankalpa, which means performing acts which are beneficial or in concert with the order of the Supreme Lord, following the order of the Lord, anukulyasya sankalpa. Ravana's refusal to heed to Vibhishana's advice and the latter's subsequent abandonment of Ravana when he rebukes Vibhishana can be interpreted as the avoidance of evils. So we want to accept all that is good, all the things which the Lord says we should do, which is good, and we want to reject all the things which the Lord says are not good. So we have do's and don'ts, right? So Parikulya Sivarjana is the second part of Sharanagati, or the second anga of Sharanagati, and that is the abandonment of all evils. So this is the example given here is Ravana's leaving, Vibhishana is leaving Ravana's company, giving up his brother, right? Because his brother is an impediment to his surrender to Lord Rama. This is further elaborated by his rejection of all possessions, including sons, wife, friends, etc. The very abandonment of Sri Lanka, right? Basically, Vibhishana becomes a refugee that goes to India. He goes to meet Rama and surrender to Rama. He leaves completely his country, Sri Lanka. So, thus shows this anga in the following lines. Okay, so it describes it, which means he took refuge in Rama, having forsaken his wife and children, and even his country. The third anga, karpanya or helplessness, is traced to the following utterances of Vibhishana when he introduced himself to Sugriva and others. So Vibhishana is surrendering unto Rama, and he has to introduce himself to Rama's associates and has to get everybody's agreement to accept him, because he's on the other side. He was with Ravana, his brother, and then he's come to surrender to Rama. So there's a big discussion about whether they should accept him because he's an enemy. So he has to surrender to them. He has to show that he's helpless. Karpanya means helpless. I am the brother of Ravana. I have been humiliated by him, and I take refuge in you, the refuge of all beings. My riches, my friends, and Lanka have been abandoned by me. So this is also from the Ramayana. The fourth anga, so we had Anukulyasa Sankalpa, right, following what the Lord wants. Parikulya, giving up so do's and don'ts. Parikulya Arjuna, right, and Karpanya, helplessness, feeling of helplessness. And now we have Mahavishvasha. Mahavishvasha means great faith after doing those first three things, that the Lord will save us, right, and that He is our only shelter. So that is also indicated by the following verse of Vibhishana, which Vibhishana's faith in Rama is firm and steadfast, is shown by the characterization of Vibhishana as one who possesses great wisdom. Sarva loke, this should be Sharanyaya, Raghavaya Mahatmane, right? Sarva loke, Sharanyaya, right? So the shelter of everyone in all the worlds, right? Raghavaya Mahatmane, the great personality, Lord Rama, Raghava. Vibhishano Mahaprajnaha. right? So he is a great person who can understand that, right? This is also stated in Bhagavad-Gita. Vasudeva Saramiti Samahatma Suduravaha. If you want to be a Mahatma or a great personality, right, you have to understand that the Supreme Lord Krishna, Vasudeva, is everything. Samahatma Suduravaha, right? And that's very rarely attained. So the fifth anga, or Gopatitvarnam, consists in Vibhishana's prayer for protection that's expressed in the words Raghavam Sharanam Gataha. Right? So we look back here. Can we say it in this here it's Sharanam Gataha. Raghavam Sharanam Gataha, I surrender unto Rama. The Angi Atmanikshepa, right? Or the surrender of the self is expressed, and he's given some Sanskrit here, or offer me Vibhishana to him at once. Offer me Vibhishana to him at once. The presence of the angas and the angi means the limbs, and the angi means the main part of surrender. Atmanikshepa becomes a whole. Though the chief of the camp advises Rama adversely, so Sugriva and all these other personalities say to Rama, don't accept this person, Vibhishana, because he's an enemy, right? Rama announces his readiness to protect even Ravana if he surrenders for protection. What to speak of Vibhishana. Further, Lord Rama declares that he is ready to admit into his fold even one who poses himself to be friendly and assures that he would not forget him, even though there are defects in him. So Rama not only says that he will accept Vibhishana, who is surrendered to Lord Rama, but he says he would even accept Ravana himself if he came and surrendered. Not only that, he says even if a person just feigns or pretends to surrender, he will assuredly protect that person and accept that person, even though he might have many defects. So these other angis or angas of Sharanagati, like Anukulisya Sankalpa Pratikulisya Vajana Karpanya Mahavishvasya Varnam, these things may not be present actually at the time of surrender exactly, or somebody may pretend to surrender in this way, but the Lord takes that as an excuse to protect the surrendered soul. So he says, even if there's defects in the form or in the content of the surrender that is made. So it means I will never give up anyone who approaches me with friendly attitude, even if he is full of defects. This is the way of noble people. The Lord Rama said this. Thus, and in fact, the Ramacharma sloka, he says, Sakrideva Kapannaya, one who is simply surrenders to me once only, right, and says, I am yours, right, that he protects that person. He gives that person liberation. So thus, from the Vibhishana episode, it is noted that his surrender, besides bringing the protection from evils of his brother, secured the lost kingdom, Lanka. Hence, it's concluded that in the Ramayana, there are a number of incidents where Sharanagati played a useful role. This may be the reason that Ramayana is otherwise called as the golden bedrock of Sharanagati Vidya. Right, so this is all in Ramayana. Ramayana is being covered quite elaborately here because there's a lot of episodes of surrender in the Ramayana, but specifically Vibhishana's surrender is considered to be the most important one in the Ramayana. So Sharanagati in Bhagavad-Gita. So Bhagavad-Gita is part of the Mahabharata, which is the other Itihasa that we have. The Itihasas and Puranas are considered to be explanations of the Vedas, and they're very important. Mahabharata is sometimes called the fifth Veda. So the essence or the quintessence of the Mahabharata is the Bhagavad-Gita and the 1,000 names of Vishnu Sahasranama. But here we're going to talk about Sharanagati in the Bhagavad-Gita. So the Bhagavad-Gita is the Lord's own utterances in the battlefield of Kurukshetra to Arjuna. So Lord Krishna speaks to Arjuna the Bhagavad-Gita. Hence, it has the highest reverence and proper source of guidance for attaining moksha, for attaining liberation. In fact, there is nothing more to ask because the concept of Sharanagati or surrender is demonstrated by Lord Krishna himself. Right? Lord Krishna became the servant, right? He surrendered to Arjuna, and he surrendered. He surrendered to many things. Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra asked that Krishna should not personally take up weapons. Krishna became the charioteer of Arjuna, so he surrendered in many ways. Lord Krishna himself surrendered like that. But here we're going to be talking more about Arjuna's total surrender to Lord Krishna. The speciality of Bhagavad-Gita is that it invokes our faith and attention on looking at Arjuna's total surrender or Sharanagati to Lord Krishna. The Bhagavad-Gita shows different sadhanas for attaining moksha. So this is interesting because up until now, we haven't talked about the other 31 Upanishadic vidyas which talk about moksha. There are other ways to attain moksha. We're only talking about the Nyasa Vidya or Sharanagati because this whole book is basically about Sharanagati. Similarly, we haven't talked about in the Ramayana. The Ramayana is all about Sharanagati. Now, the Mahabharata, there's also different things, like the Bhagavad Gita, different methods of attaining moksha are given. So these different methods are Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga. So it is a repository of sadhanas, of different methods to attain moksha, such as karma, jnana, and bhakti, and Sharanagati, which are the sadhanas exemplified in Sri Vaishnavism. So in Sri Vaishnavism, we'll talk about all these different sadhanas. The Gita's main teaching is the practice of nishkama karma. Nishkama karma means desireless action, right? Or doing of one's duty without aspiring any results. Only in such a state of mind, the jnana or knowledge will emerge. Lord Krishna's teachings in the Gita have great ethical importance rather than metaphysical significance. The gist of the Gita is that God is the exemplar of all virtues. All living beings find their presence in him only. He is the sutradhari, or the prime mover of the two tattvas being Purusha and Prakriti. Purusha and Prakriti, or the Supreme Lord and material nature of the universe, are intertwined with God. It teaches that God is the supporter or adara of everything, of the souls and the world, the controller or niyanta, the controller of the souls in the world, the whole or the sheshi, right? He is actually pervading from outside as well as inside. Time, kala, right? The originator or Shrishtikara, the creator of everything, the protector or the rakshaka, right? The one who protects everything, and the destroyer or the destroyer. So this is to describe, this is a definition. This is very similar to the Upanishadic definition that we have of the Supreme Lord, which comes from Taittiriya Upanishad. Yato va imani bhutani jayante yena jatani jivanti yat prayanti abhisham vishanti, that from which everything emanates, by which everything is maintained, and into which everything enters, is known as Brahman or Supreme, like that, right? So Bhagavad Gita attaches equal importance to karma, jnana, bhakti, and to Sharanagati. So Lord Krishna teaches all of these paths, all of these sadhanas. Right. The interrelation between the four sadhanas is expounded as follows. It seems to be meant in the Gita that it is a progressive advancement to pass from the discipline of karma to jnana, and again from the discipline of jnana to bhakti, and from bhakti to prapatti, because he who uses this last discipline to regulate and control his life is guided by a still wider and more comprehensive vision of the truth than that which is commanded by the Jnana Yogin, by the Jnana Yogin, he says here. I don't know, it means Jnana Yogin, I think. The first mantra of Upanishad states that Bhakti and Sharanagati are the best sadhanas for overcoming selfishness, and points out that through Sharanagati, if not Bhakti, right, the soul gains freedom from karma or means the results of karma, and attains both good and bad, punya and papa, and attains the abode of God, namely heaven, by the emancipated soul of God, which is its natal home and destined goal. Okay, so I don't know why he's mentioning Isopanishadi Savasimidam Sarvam Yatkincha Jagatam Jagate Jena Chaktena Jan Gunjita Mad Vidhakas. Everything animate and inanimate in this world is owned and controlled by the Lord, right? And therefore one should recognize that and not take anything as belonging to himself, even his own soul. Even he himself, the Atman, the Jivatman, belongs and is owned by the Lord. We are the property of the Lord. Therefore, because we're the property of the Lord, we have to give up the idea that we own other property or that we are our own property, and therefore we have to do like that. The destined goal of the Supreme. Right. I don't know why he's mentioning here he's Upanishad again, because we're supposedly talking about Bhagavad-Gita. So now coming to considering the Gita in brief, to trace the concept of Saranagati, which starts with Arjuna's appeal to Lord Krishna. So first of all, the first Saranagati of Arjuna in the Gita occurs in the second chapter, where Arjuna asks the Lord to drive the chariot between the two armies, right, and then he is dejected and he feels that he can't continue on with the battle. And then he says to Lord Krishna, please enlighten me. And he says that I am a surrendered soul to you as a teacher. Please teach me. So tell me conclusively that which is wholesome for me, who am come to you for refuge as your pupil. This shows Arjuna's helplessness as well as his submission to the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. This is in keeping with the opinion of Yamunacharya, who in his Gita Sangraha, which is a set of 32 verses, which is written by Yamunacharya, right, the grand guru of the Param Guru of great teacher of Ramanuja, that summarizes and gives us the essence of the Bhagavad-Gita. So in that he says, this means an inquiry that is made to show that a proposed work is needed. For Arjuna, the author, wished to teach the Shastra, that is, as it had been practically lost to the world, and he needed only the excuse in property made by Arjuna. So the Supreme Lord had this on the excuse of teaching Saranagati or property, the method of surrender to Arjuna, began to teach the whole Bhagavad Gita. Saranagati is referred to in relation to Karma Yoga in the 10th and 11th verses of the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. The original slokas are Vitaraga, Bhayakroda, Vanmaya, Mamupashritaha, Bhavo, Jnanat, Pasha, Bhuta, Madbhavam, Agataha. Madbhava. Okay. It means freedom from attachment, fear, and anger, absorbed in me, taking refuge in me, purified by austerity of wisdom, many have come to my being. Shankaracharya, in his commentary on Bhagavad Gita, makes property synonymous with devotion to jnana, and suggests in the 11th stanza of the 4th chapter that any form of devotion as an exercise of affection is compatible with delusion, and that jnana or knowledge is the only way, right? So this is the idea of Adi Shankaracharya, who's an Advaitin monist. For Vishishta Dvaitins, or Sri Vaishnavas, right, that devotion to Lord Vishnu alone is the supreme devotion, and devotion to other deities would be blessed relatively less, and Sharanagati too can be shown only to Lord Vishnu, who is the Supreme Lord. No sinner, no matter how wrong his past life may have been, is beyond redemption. The Lord takes a special delight in granting pardon to those who have sinned the most, right? So this is described in the doctrine of Sri Vaishnavas called Sabhogya Heta Kripa. Actually, the Lord enjoys the sins of the world because it gives him an excuse to save the sinners. This is being narrated in the 36th sloka or verse of the 4th chapter, which also reflects in Ramanuja's Sharanagati Gadya. So Ramanuja also wrote 9 works. One of them is called Sharanagati Gadya, or it's the discussion about surrender. Further, it is observed that the cause of all sins are selfishness, and once man is able to overcome his selfish desires, he becomes an emancipated soul which deserves to enjoy all the high and heavenly privileges of eternity. The self-enlightenment and realization of God offers man deliverance of worldly ties and not bhakti as such, but bhakti is instrumental in achieving self-enlightenment and realization of God. So the devotion itself of the soul is not the actual cause of the deliverance of man, but is the self-enlightenment or the realization of God, jnanat moksha, that is what creates it. Actually, of course, it is only by the grace of God, His supreme grace, that one attains that position. In the fourth adhyaya, or the fourth chapter, Lord Krishna proclaims, Shreyan dravya maya yagya nad dhyana yagya parantapa sarva karma kilam parta dhyane hari samapyate, which means knowledge as a sacrifice is greater than any material sacrifice, O scourge of the foe, Arjuna. For all works without any exception culminate in wisdom. So he's trying to explain here the how from karma yoga comes jnana yoga, comes bhakti yoga, and finally property. How it's a progression. The basis for the doctrine of kainkarya means service to the Lord, is explained in the 9th verse of the 6th chapter. According to Pila Lokacharya, property is defined as stoic steadiness of mind of the yogi. So when the yogi has a completely mind fixed completely on the Lord, then that is stoic steadiness, that kainkarya service, right? Apart from this, he also seeks the selfless service of his fellow propaners. So not only does the refugee, the surrenderer, the person who has done Saranagati at the feet of the Lord, wish to serve the Lord, right? Kainkarya. He also wants to serve his fellow refugees or his fellow devotees, like that. The others who are also servants of the Lord, like that, because they're also part of the Lord in that sense. Apart from this, he also seeks the selfless service of his fellow propaners, and by this expresses the love of God that is operating in him. The point that has to be emphasized, therefore, is that all jivas, or all jivatmans, all souls, right, are the embodiment of God, and the best way of serving God is by serving the jivas in whom the Lord resides. So it's not, we can't say it's the only way, but we can directly serve God in Kainkarya, and we can also serve the Lord by serving others, because the others are all part of the Lord, and they're all servants of the Lord also. So property cannot possibly be separated from altruism in this sense. So this shows that Saranagati is capable of leading the aspirant to the highest goal. As a matter of fact, the central idea of Saranagati doctrine is present in the following Gita passages. The original text follows as follows: Ye yata mam padyante tam sataiva bhajamyaham mama vartman vartante manushya partha sarvashaha, which means, Arjuna, however men seek me, even so do I approach them. For all men follow my path in every way. In the 7th chapter, Lord Krishna proclaims, Daivihi Eshiguramai Mamamai Virateya Mameviye Padyante Mayam Itam Tarantite. This means, for this most wonderful Maya, or veil of mine, consisting of the three gunas, or three modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, is extremely difficult to break through. Those, however, who constantly adore me alone are able to cross over it, or able to cross beyond it. In the above verses, the syllables mam prapadyante yante and mam eva ye prapadyante, both of which we see this verb prapadyante, which means surrender, shows the themes of Saranagati. In the same 7th chapter of the Gita, declares in unmistakable terms the significance of Saranagati, or surrender, as a means to moksha. The text says, Namam duskritina mudha, again, prapadyante, we have that verb again, prapadyante, they surrender, right? Naradama, maya parita jnana, asuram bhavamashrita. It means those whose wisdom are carried away by Maya and who are embrace the demoniac nature, such foolish and vile men of evil deeds, do not adore me, right? Na prapadyante. So there are those who surrender to the Lord and those who don't surrender to the Lord. There's another verse that comes with that. So namam duskritina mudha prapadyantena dhamma maya pratigyana asuramavamashita. These are na prapadye, who do not surrender to the Lord. And then we have the four that surrender. Arto Jigyasurata Jnanichab Bhartarshaba. We have the four that do surrender to the Lord. Right. The man of wisdom, Udata Ivaite Gyan Tatpaiva Mematam, the Gyani is considered to be the best by the Lord, the one in knowledge, the one in full knowledge, who surrenders. Right. So in the 18th chapter, Lord Krishna tells the individual souls as follows. Now that you have developed your character, strength, your individuality based on your human context and society and its interaction, I whisper gently to you, renounce and surrender all that developed ego to me, and the one divine self that dwells in all men, in all nature. That renunciation will be genuine. That surrender will also be the supreme victory. For there is something worthwhile to surrender, and that surrender is the highest and the best in man and nature, the immortal, infinite reality behind the mortal and the finite. The above passage describes Saranagati tradition, or the tradition of surrender. Basing on this, in the following verses, where Lord Krishna underlined the importance of Saranagati, they are, here's some other verses, right? So, apichet suraturo bhajite mamananyabak, sadareva samantavya samyagava vasito hi saha. It means, even if a man of the most evil conduct worships me with undistracted devotion, he must be reckoned as righteous, for he is rightly resolved. Therein, Lord Krishna says in his great Charma Sloka, the last and final order of the Lord in Bhagavad-Gita, in the 18th chapter, verse 66, Sarvadamam paritaja mam ekam sharanam bhaja ham tva sarvapapebhyo mokshayishimi masachaha. It tells that, resigning all your duties to me, the all-powerful and all-supporting Lord, take refuge in me alone. I shall absolve you of all sins, worry not. Again, Lord Krishna says, Tameva shanam gacha sarva bhavena bharata tat prasadat param shantim stanam prapshyasi sasvatam. Which means, take shelter in him alone with all your being, Arjuna. By his mere grace, you shall attain supreme peace and the eternal state. Further, Lord Krishna says, Yetu sarvani karmani, mayi sanyasya matparaha, anyenaiva yogena mam, dhyayanta upasate, teshamaham samudritya, tarta, mrityu samsara sagarat, bhavami nachirat partha, mayaveshita chetasam, which means, those who depend exclusively on me and surrendering all action to me, worship me, the God with attributes, right? Constantly meditating on me with single-minded devotion, these, Arjuna, I speedily deliver from the ocean of birth and death, their mind being fixed on me. The above verses point out that the significant feature of Saranagati, or surrender, is the attainment of Godhead. The point of emphasis is that one should surrender at the feet of the Lord in order to attain the highest reality. An aspirant who does not have the capacity to adopt other sadhanas such as karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, etc., can adopt the sadhana named Saranagati, or surrender. God is all loving, true friend, and has unaccountable compassion. Hence, any aspirant who does not have a knowledge of other sadhanas, the only alternative is to surrender to the Lord. The Lord himself says, Mamhi parta vyapashritya yepisyu papayonayaha striya vaishyas tata sudras tepi yanti paramagatim. Tells him that the way those who take refuge in him, though they be low-born, women, vaishyas, as well as sudras, they can attain the highest goal of moksha. That is chapter 9, verse 32. So, thus, it is clear that one must seek the protection of God in every way. Then only he can redeem us through his all-encompassing, right, love and compassion. Seeking the protection of God in every way is explained by Lord Krishna in the Gita as follows: Man manabha madbhakto majjiti mam namaskuru mami vaishasi yuktvaivam atmanam matparayanaha. Excuse me. It means fix your mind on me, be devoted to me, worship me, and make obeisance to me. Thus, linking yourself with me and entirely depending on me, you shall come to me. Here, Lord Krishna describes 4 ways through which the individual soul can seek God's protection. The 4 aspects of the jiva, or the living being, mind, reason, senses, and the body, should be under control. The word "fix your mind on me" describes that one must have unstinted devotion with the above said 4 aspects while seeking God's protection. By saying, "Be devoted to me," God tells us to direct our reasoning towards him. In the words, "Offer worship to me," the Lord tells that devotion must aim at him after knowing the truth that he is the enjoyer of all sacrificial performances and duties. Right, so that's also mentioned in the I think 6th chapter, where Krishna says, that if you know that the Supreme Lord is the owner and controller of all planets, the enjoyer, right? So he's the enjoyer, he's the owner of everything, and he's your well-wishing friend, right? Then that is the true peace message. So in this context, Gita says, Aham Atma Gurakesha Sarva Bhuta Sitaha Aham Adishcha Madhyamcha Bhutana Mantamevacha. Arjuna, I, the universal self, seated in the heart of all beings, so I alone, the beginning, the middle, and also the end of all beings. The saying, "make obeisance to me," means one should surrender everything unto, including his vara, pala, and swarupa. So his swarupa is his very soul. The pala means any fruit, any punya, any good reactions from good karmas that he's done. And his vara, the burden of his sins, right? Bad reactions, the papa. All of these things should be surrendered to the Lord. In other words, it implies that one should have complete devotion to God and no other. Lord Krishna speaks about complete devotion in the following way: Bhaktya tvananyaya shakya aham evam vidorjuna gyatum justum cha tatvena pravestum cha parantapa. Through single-minded devotion, however, I can be seen in this form, right, where he showed his four-armed form in the chapter 11, where he's showing the universal form of the Gurati Rupa to Arjuna, and known in essence, and even entered into, O valiant Arjuna. Again, to Arjuna, Lord Krishna proclaims, Mad karma krinmat paramo mad bhakta sangavajita near vaira sarvabhuteshu ya sa mameti pandava. Arjuna, he who performs all his duties for my sake, depends on me, is devoted to me, has no attachment, and is free from malice towards all beings, reaches me. So in the above 2 verses, Lord Krishna tells that self-surrender is the prime component of devotion, and the devotee is exclusively dependent on God. So it can be concluded that complete surrender and complete devotion are one and the same. Right, so this is why sometimes the different Vaishnava sampradayas, they talk about bhakti being the method, or sometimes even Sri Vaishnavas talk about bhakti being the way. like that. Vaishnava Sampradayas talk about bhakti yoga, or bhakti being the way to attain God or to attain liberation, right? And sometimes we talk about Sharanagati. And in Sri Vaishnavism, it's more intricately defined and is separated into two separate aspects with slightly different qualities, like that. But both of them are really synonymous, because in Sharanagati, or in surrender, there is bhakti, there is devotion, and in devotion there is also surrender. So in one sense they're synonymous, in another sense they can be seen as separate parts. So hence the concept. So thus, the Bhagavad-Gita explains clearly the meaning of Sharanagati, or surrender, which is the sole means for moksha, right? So although we read the Bhagavad-Gita, we see that the Bhagavad-Gita talks about karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga. Finally, it culminates with this idea of Sharanagati, or surrender, in the 18th chapter. Hence, the concept of Sharanagati, or surrender, is well incorporated in Bhagavad-Gita. We've seen all the different verses. So now we're talking about the alvars in Sharanagati. Sharanagati in the Vedas, Sharanagati we just touched on a couple of places from the Pancharatra also. Sharanagati in the Ramayana, Sharanagati in the Mahabharata, and especially in the Bhagavad-Gita.
Well, in from what I'm seeing, in, like, for example, with the Mahabharata, with Dhritarashtra and Vidur, it was a external entity acting to push Dhritarashtra to take this Sharanagati. But is there any Agyata Sukriti associated with let's like to come to Vaishnavism? Some Agyata Sukriti is needed.
Agyata Sukriti means the unknowing pious acts that will bring us to doing something else. So ultimately, the point is that we are not the actor, the Lord is the actor. And so even the Lord impels us to do Sharanagati, to surrender to him, like that. So you say there's some unseen force that made Dhritarashtra to accept this, finally to surrender, like that. So that is the Lord. The Lord is the one who makes us to surrender ultimately, like that. So some people, so initially when people hear about surrender to the Lord, they think, oh, surrender to the Lord is something that I must do and that I have to do. And if I don't do, then I can't attain liberation, or I can't attain the feet of the Lord, or I can't attain the goal, like that. But the fact is, it's the Lord who's actually making us to do all these things. So he is also making us to surrender as well. So like that. So when you come to understand that, you feel also that you're more helpless, because the Lord is actually the mover. He's the one who's the prime mover, who's making. So what you're saying is Dhritarashtra was made by the Lord to surrender. So it's interesting that the Lord made Dhritarashtra only surrender when he was a very old man. Whereas Prahlad, right from his birth, or even from before his birth, he was a surrendered soul.
Yeah.
But in either case, the Lord is making us to surrender. The fact is that our relationship as a soul, as being completely supported, controlled, and owned by the Lord, right, is that by our very nature, we're a servant of the Lord. By our very nature, we are supposed to serve him. And so, therefore, it's only really natural. It's natural for us to serve him. It's natural for us to surrender to him. So our natural position is to be surrendered to him. So once we understand the truth of reality is that we are surrendered to him, that we are his servants. We just don't know it. We think that we're not his servants, and therefore we think we have to go and serve him. We have to make a surrender to him and become his servant. But that's not true. We're already his servants. By our very nature, we're his servants, like that. So simply coming to that realization that we're his servants, automatically everything's taken care of, like that.
So the potentiality of service is there.
Yeah, definitely, of course. Not only it's covered. The service is covered. But Krishna says in the Gita, everybody follows my path. Everybody serves me in all respects. Whatever you're doing, Krishna is arranging for you to do that. So Krishna is also arranging for all those 4 people who don't surrender to him. He's arranging for them to do their thing. the Mudhas and the Naradamas and the Asuras and the Maya Prityanas, these people, right? The demoniac people who don't surrender directly to Krishna, but it doesn't matter whether they're surrendered directly or indirectly. Indirectly, he makes them to do whatever they do. So ultimately, it's the will of the Lord, which is most important. The will of the Lord, the grace of the Lord, which is most important. The nature of the soul, any soul and every soul, right? Unlike there are some other forms of Vaishnavism like Madhvism, where they feel that the essence of certain souls is demoniac, or the essence of certain souls is tamasic or rajasic or sattvic. No, the essence of every soul is to be a servant of the Lord, is to serve the Lord. So we just have to realize that. We just have to come to that realization. And coming to that realization is also going to be, Krishna says in the Bhagavad-Gita, by all the Vedas, I am seated within everybody's heart. And for me comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. So even that knowledge that you're the servant of the Lord comes from God. He gives you that knowledge that you're his servant. So nothing can happen without the Lord. You can't come to this realization without his grace. So everything is his grace. So in reality, there's Agyata Sukriti means unknown pious activities. But the pious activities that we've done, even if they're pious activities or impious activities, whatever activities that have been done by the Lord. So when we understand this, there's really no difference between, there's no Agyata, there's no Sukriti which isn't done by the Lord. Everything is done by the Lord. So because everything is done by the Lord, so therefore the minute independence of the jiva is very, very small. The jivatman is even less able to have independence than we can possibly think. We think that we can be independent, but we actually cannot be independent. We're never independent. Yeah, it's like a slave thinking that he's free, but he's not free. There's no way that he's free. He's in illusion thinking that he's free.
So where's the impetus of free will? And I know that will train a whole different.
Yeah, free will. Yeah. So, okay, that'll be a very long discussion. Free will and free will. There's a discussion in philosophy about free will and determinism. Is everything therefore determined? In a sense, everything is determined. In a sense, everything is determined, and there is no free will. Because how can we say there's free will? If there's a free will, it means that there's a free will for us to. If we have free will, if we have some free will, we have the free will to turn away from God forever. Is that possible? In Madhva Vaishnavism, they say that's possible. That's possible to turn away from God forever, to go to hell forever, to stay in this material world forever. But in Sri Vaishnavism, we don't believe that that's possible. It's not possible because our eternal nature has to come through eventually. Otherwise, you can say that there's free will. Can it be really free? Can we be free if our nature is to be a servant or a slave?
No, you can be free.
Then can we change our nature? In Gaudiya Vaishnavism, they say Jiva Swarupoi Nitya Krishna Das. Right? So somebody said eternal. Nitya means eternal. You're eternally a servant of Krishna. So is it possible to change that? No. If it's not possible to change that, then how is there any free will? There's no real free will. So there may be an appearance of free will, right, in certain aspects of existence. But it's really only an appearance because God is the controller of everything. If he's the controller of absolutely everything, then that means there's nothing that is under our control. You can only say you have free will if you can control something, if you can do something separate. But if you can't do anything separate, then how can you say you have any sort of free will? So it's a sort of a complicated and deep philosophical discussion about free will and determinism, because we feel that we have free will, and in a sense, because we have some of the aspects of God, but in minute quantity. We have some of the qualities of God, but in minute quantity. We have some. We appear to have some ability to act in ways that he acts, in very minute ways. right? But in actual fact, underlying everything, he's the controller, he's the supporter, he's the master. We are the servant, we are the controlled, we are the upheld.
Why I ask that is almost like some persons who come to Krishna consciousness or Vaishnavism or any variant form of Vaishnavism is like events are orchestrated in their life to take the step of Sharanagati to some degree. So where you're saying I lend my entire mind, body, intelligence to you. Tvameva mata cha pita tvameva. It's like as you the more you step up to that surrender, is the more you're pulled, impelled. Even if you want it or you don't, even if you don't want it, so to speak, you're pushed, you're pulled towards surrendering more and more.
Some people are pushed, some people are not pushed. We don't know why. We don't know. We can't. Inscrutable is the ways of the Lord. So the Lord acts, and He has His own plan, and He has His own things. But everybody is actually following Him. Everybody is a servant of Him, even if you don't know it. Even if you're not. Even if you don't see. Even when Lord Krishna came, Shishupala cursed him 100 times, and then Lord killed him. But why did the Lord allow Shishupala to do that? Why did the Lord make Shishupala to do that? Was Shishupala free to do that? Did he freely do that of his own will, or was it arranged by the Lord? This is all Leela. That's why in Sri Vaishnavism we call this world Leela Vibhuti, because it is the place of the Leela of the Lord. Actually, everything goes on here by the will of the Lord. It goes on there also in Vaikuntha by the will of the Lord. So there's really no difference. The difference is that we don't know it and accept it. So you have one person who is a servant of the Lord in Vaikuntha, he knows and accepts it. And one person in this material world, he's also the servant of the Lord, but he doesn't know it and he doesn't accept it. That's all. That's the only difference. The only difference is whether you accept it or whether you understand it or not. It's the understanding that brings about liberation. The understanding of your position. So in a sense, that's why he quoted Shankaracharya, because Shankara is saying, no, it's the knowledge which is important. So we agree with Shankara in one sense, right? Usually the Vaishnavas say, no, it's not knowledge. It's not words, it's not knowledge. It's devotion, which is most important, like that. But it's the knowledge of our relationship with God, that we are His servant and we are meant to serve Him. That's liberation. That is the cause of liberation. What we call liberation. What is it that we call liberation? It's just a mindset, the change of mentality to our original mentality. Our original mentality is to understand what we are, what we really are. When we understand that, then that's liberation.
So why I'm asking that is it so to the first premise that is God Himself who would have, as you said, I use the term impeller, the pushing force. But is there any no saint, no Mahatma to actually start that, or is there no medium between?
There can be many ways. He can do it in many ways. But what does Krishna say in the Bhagavad-Gita? I come myself or I send my representative. Right? He comes himself sometimes. We're unfortunate. Unfortunately, we're not around. We're not living in the time of one of the avatars. We can't go and personally be in Lord Rama's army and help him to, free Sita, or we can't personally observe, the city of Dwarka with Lord Krishna or whatever. We can't be part of those things. We weren't born in that particular time. Okay, so to see, but there are great saints, there are great Vaishnavas and great mystics who have descended to help us to understand these things. Mm-hmm. So the Lord is there within the heart of every living being. So He's very close to us. He can give us realization at any moment. So Yes, okay. So we have a teacher outside. There may be many teachers outside who the Lord sends to try to teach us things, but the Lord is there also as Chaitya Guru within us. So unless you can have the best teacher in the world, the greatest guru in the world, you can be the disciple of the greatest guru in the world, but unless the Lord within your heart allows you to have that realization of what the teacher is teaching you, the teacher may teach you, but you may not learn. And if the Lord wants you to learn, he'll give you that realization. So it's really all up to the super soul.
Oh.
We think, oh, I got taught something by a teacher. You know, I went to college and I studied a course and I became learned. But all knowledge is coming from the Lord. The external guru, the external teacher, spiritual teacher or material, any kind of teacher like that is simply a representative of the Lord. We think that we're getting knowledge from the teacher by going to school or by going to a class or something. But actually, we're getting knowledge from the super soul. The soul is allowing us realization. The Vedic seers understood this. They meditated and simply they didn't, they just had realization. They realized the message of the Vedas was from within. That's also possible. That's also possible.
Queen Kunti is to be included in this category.
Who?
Queen Kunti.
Yeah, anybody can be in this category.
Why I ask? I know in most rituals they end also by saying Tvameva Mata Chapita Tvameva Bandhus Chasaka Tvameva Vidya Dravinan Tvameva Sarvam. You're my everything. Deva Deva. So just
this is good. You're my everything.
Yeah.
This comes in Saranagati Gajama Brahmanuji, Tvameva Mata Chapita Tvameva Gurus come Sakatmeva. He says, you're my teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, so okay, that's a famous verse like that. It doesn't. Not every puja ritual ends with that, but yeah, it's very common. Okay, you're everything. What does that mean? Again, from Bhagavad-Gita, Vasudeva Sarvamiti. Vasudeva Sarvam. Krishna is everything. Vasudeva is everything. He's everything. That means he's not only the Supreme Lord separate from us. He's not only the universe. We're also part of him.
Oh,
the universe and the souls are the body of God.
As Sripad Ramanujacharya.
Yes, so we have the souls, we have the universe, and then greater than everything is God. God includes everything.
Oh.
Vasudeva Sarvamiti. Sarvam means you're part of Sarvam, I'm part of Sarvam, this world is part of Sarvam, everything is part of Sarvam. So if Vasudeva Sarvamiti, Vasudeva is everything. Everything. The very first name in Vishnu Sahasranama, the 1,000 names of Vishnu, is Vishvam, the universe. Everything, meaning Vishvam, meaning everything that we know. Everything that we experience, everything that we know, Vishvam is the Lord. Vishvam. Vishvam, he's everything. He pervades everything from the outside. The next one is Vishnu. He pervades everything from the inside. Vishvam Vishnu Vasatkaru. This is how it starts. So very important in the beginning. So in the beginning of Vishnu Sahasranam, a lot can be said about those two names because they encompass everything. That is why in Sri Vaishnavism we talk about 3 mantras which are called Vyapika Mantras. Om Namo Narayanaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Vishnave. Right? This is the 8-syllable, 12-syllable, and 6-syllable mantras of Vishnu. They're called Vyapika Mantras. Vyapika means pervasive. So the Lord pervades from outside, he pervades from inside, and he pervades from outside and inside. So the 6-syllable mantra Om Namo Vishnave talks about Vishnu. Vishnu is one who pervades from inside. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya talks about the Lord who pervades from outside. Om Namo Narayanaya. Narayanaya speaks about Lord pervading from inside and from outside, both at the same time. So these 3 are the most important names for God because all pervasiveness is the most important. There are many, many qualities of God. God has Parasya Shakti Vividaya Shurite. He has got Ananta Kalyana Gunas. He has got unlimited, auspicious qualities. Right? We can't describe him. Ananta has a million mouths or unlimited mouths. He cannot describe fully the qualities of the Lord, the great qualities of the Lord. The Lord is unlimited, so we can't fully describe him. Each one of his names describes him in some way. Krishna means Karshati, comes from Karshati, all attractive. Rama means the giver of all pleasure, right? Ramyate, right? So there's different, different names of the Lord that have different meanings and, different direct meanings. But, and so we can look at Vishnu Sahasranam, there's all those meanings, all those names. But what are the main names? The main names describe the most essential meaning, the most essential definition of God. In Sanskrit, there's a word lakshana. Lakshana means the essential definition of something, right? So there may be other people who are attractive. There may be other people who give pleasure to you, right? There may be other people who have some of the qualities of God. But there's a quality that God has, which you don't have, which in no way can you have. And that is all pervasiveness. You cannot be all pervasive in any way, shape, or form because you are minute. You're Anu. He is Vibhu. He's all pervasive. So he pervades from the outside and the inside and nobody else. So you can say Krishna is the most attractive. Rama is the giver of most pleasure, like that. You can say that. They have those. Every form of God has all these qualities in full. But what is the essential defining lakshana quality of God in any of his aspects, which points to the fact that he alone has this quality and no other being has this quality, and that's all pervasiveness. So the names of God which describe him as an all pervader from within or from without or from both within and without, these are considered to be the most essential names of God. And therefore the mantras which use those and which allow us to meditate upon that nature, that essential nature of God, right, are considered to be the main mantras. So this is why in Pancharatra these are the three mantras called Vyapika Mantras. And Om Namo Narayana is considered the greatest one of all. So that's the reason. That's the reason, and that's described in Mamukshapadi. In Mamukshapadi, Pilarokacharya talks about that. And you can look at there's a couple of sets of videos. Dr. Alwar teaches Mamukshapadi. I also have discussions on Mamukshapadi on the YouTube channel, and you can go and look at those, and we'll explain in more detail about the Vyapika mantras, like that. So we're not saying that people should not chant other names of God. Right? In Kalishantra and Upanishad, it says chant Hari Rama Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Hari Rama, like this. It says, in Narayana Upanishad, it says chant Om Namo Narayana. But we're looking at the mantras from the point of view of meditating on the meaning and how the essential meaning of the mantra, of the name in the mantra, has some very, very deep esoteric meaning beyond just describing that God is the giver of all pleasure or is the most attractive or whatever. But what's the essential aspect? And so that's why it's considered important. It doesn't mean that these other mantras are also lesser, but it's just if we want to meditate upon that essential nature, right? These mantras are good for that because they describe the essential nature, like that. Vyapika mantras. Om Namo